Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the content patch for the 1st of November 2012. My name is TotalBiscuit, bringing you 20 minutes of what appears to be gaming news and comment. At least I think it's 20 minutes, I can't really be sure these days. I guess we'll nail the format down at some point. Coming up in the show, Sons of Anarchy creator asks Rockstar to develop a Sons of Anarchy video game. Medal of Honor Warfighter's poor reviews could spark the end of the franchise, says analyst Michael Pachter. Curiosity, the game from Peter Molyneux's studio 22 Cans, has been given a final release date. Developers team up with scientists to help make smarter games. Sales of Square Enix's Sleeping Dogs title, unfortunately rather sleepy indeed, and the Halo 4 devs speak out against sexist behavior online. Sons of Anarchy creator Kurt Sutter has been shopping around just a little bit as regards to the idea of making a Sons of Anarchy video game. He was seen on Twitter communicating with Rockstar, saying, "You should make the Sons of Anarchy game. I know it's an expensive and complicated process, but let's chat and see if we can make it happen." Now, this news is a little bit interesting for a couple of reasons, one of which being that this is not the first time he's tried to make this happen. He was quoted back in February stating that he was in talks with a major gaming company about making the game a reality, and in May he reported that one particular meeting with a big distributor had, quote, gone great. However, this tweet right here from the 11th of August indicates that this did not go as well as he had hoped. Got no traction whatsoever on the Sons of Anarchy game, and it looks like the big publisher blew us off. Yeah, that's unfortunate, isn't it? Or is it? That's the thing, or is it? Do you really care about the idea of getting a Sons of Anarchy video game? I don't know about you, but I really like the Sons of Anarchy series. I think it's one of the best series I've seen in a very, very long time indeed. But, of course, that's coming from somebody that thought The Shield was one of the best series that's ever been made. I watched that start to finish, and I absolutely loved it. If there's anything Kurt Sutter can do, it's the idea of absolutely nailing the concept of the anti-hero. That's exactly what the Sons of Anarchy series and indeed S.H.I.E.L.D. does really, really well indeed. And I love watching these anti-hero moral drama kind of series. Crazy thing about this guy is that this is really all he's actually done. He's done Sons of Anarchy, he's done the S.H.I.E.L.D., and that's really about it. He very much rose through the ranks. He started off as a staff writer over at the S.H.I.E.L.D. and ended up as executive producer in season 6 and 7. That's a pretty quick rise up, honestly, and the guy's obviously got a great deal of talent. But after saying all of that, do you really want a Sons of Anarchy video game? I've got to say that I played the S.H.I.E.L.D. video game and it was goddamn abysmal, so I don't think that's really a good option either. And there haven't been all that many series that have been successfully adapted in any real respect to the video game format. It's actually, I think, even worse than movie adaptations. There have been some good movie games, not many. Most of them suck. Some of them are average, a few of them are really good. Name one series that has really inspired a very good video game that wasn't already a large franchise. Because you can turn around and say, oh, well, Star Trek. And it's like, yes, okay, Star Trek, a good example. Transformers, another good example. But again, already a franchise. If you were to look at a drama series like The S.H.I.E.L.D., 24 put out a really terrible video game as well. Most of these straight-up drama, American-style series don't seem to work in the video game format. Maybe it's just the way that the storytelling is, or the fact that the world that they've created really isn't actually that appealing in order to build a video game around, but I don't really think I want to see a Sons of Anarchy video game because I'd play it and I'd probably be horribly disappointed. I also don't feel that there's anything I'd really want to explore outside of it because Sons of Anarchy is based in a very small town. Driving around the town doing stuff, you know, it becomes a really fifth-rate Grand Theft Auto, and quite frankly, I don't think we need anything else like that at the moment. So, as much as I wish him success, I wouldn't be upset if this game never got made, because I have a feeling that it just wouldn't be very good anyway. Speaking of games that aren't very good, Medal of Honor Warfighter, not exactly doing very well, is it? Absolutely not. And Michael Pachter, that has a lot to say about pretty much everything, has gone on to, quite frankly, state the obvious by saying that the really bad reviews could indeed be the death knell of the Medal of Honor series. He went on to compare the Metacritic scores, because that matters, right, of the original Medal of Honor game, by that, of course, I mean the one in 2010, not the one all the way back in the day with World War II, with the Metacritic scores from the current game, and stated that with an average score of only 50, The game, that being Medal of Honor Warfighter, is likely to fall short of revenue expectations by $100 million or more. Perhaps more importantly, the poor performance of Medal of Honor makes it highly unlikely that EA can deliver significant digital revenues from DLC subscriptions next year, and sets the company up for a disappointing comparison to the $204 million of digital revenues it expects from Battlefield. Good. Honestly, good. I really can't understand why EA feels the need to have two big franchises. Where does Medal of Honor actually fit into this whole multiplayer shooter scene exactly? Because as far as I can tell, there is really nothing that Medal of Honor did, especially in the original game and in this one in multiplayer, that the Battlefield games don't already do better in some way. The Battlefield games look better, they sound better, they feel better, they've got vehicles, there's far more variety in gameplay, and they are highly successful. I played Medal of Honor 2010's multiplayer quite a bit, and it really just felt like an inferior version of Battlefield. It didn't do the infantry combat any better, the level design wasn't all that interesting either. It did have this kind of rush mode style going on, where you had to move forward and complete various objectives, but again, that was then incorporated into rush modes in Battlefield 3, and of course was in Bad Company 2 as well. And it's not even an original concept, because games like Enemy Territory Quake Wars did this objective-based stuff where it tiered the level and kind of forced you along the path. In fact, that's actually from Wolfenstein Enemy Territory, that goes even further back than that. So the game didn't really offer anything original. It was horribly unbalanced when it came to its kill streaks. It was one of the last games that allowed you to stack kill streaks upon kill streaks, and it was horrible. It really was. It's like you got a missile and you then fired that. It's like, hey, I killed 3 people. Then I get an artillery and spam that. It was not a good multiplayer game at all, really. And Battlefield just seems like it's the much better game, and it's selling well. The DLC is still selling well. It's still doing well on PC, and for the problems I've got with it, it's hard to really argue that Battlefield is a bad game, because it's not. The single player sucks, but the multiplayer is really quite spectacular in many ways. So what you've got there is a more combined arms orientated modern military shooter that uses the absolute best that technology has to offer on the PC and still looks pretty good on consoles as well. That seems like it's competitive to COD. Why would you want to make a straight-up infantry game and actually go head-to-head with a really, really successful series? I think it shows a little bit of arrogance from EA's side of things, and they really don't seem to understand what makes things fun. Say whatever you like about Call of Duty, but it's always been about complete over-the-top nonsense when it comes to multiplayer. Kill streaks, stupid weapon combinations, ridiculous camo. It's like Medal of Honor went for the more serious, gritty approach, and yet I don't think that's actually appealing to really anyone. You still got the same arcadey bullet hose style of combat, and if you want the grittier stuff, you can still play Battlefield. It's almost like what they went for is a veneer of authenticity, and yet none of the mechanics actually supported that idea whatsoever. The idea of it is EA doubling down on what they see to be a very successful genre and suddenly realizing, oh crap, there's actually no room in this genre to grow unless my name is Call of Duty or, of course, Battlefield. Seriously, name a successful modern military shooter that came out over the last 6 months. Can you? Probably not. The only other game to actually sell reasonably well, at least in the past year or so, was probably Homefront, and that was sold on a really clever marketing campaign, yet turned out to be a terrible game. The multiplayer scene died within months of release, there was no DLC potential, and then the studio got gutted. And there are some ideas regarding Homefront 2, but of course we have no idea when that's actually going to come out, assuming that it even does end up coming out by this point. This genre is actually very narrow, surprisingly narrow, more so than you might think. You say, oh, well, all people are making is Call of Duty games these days. They're actually not. And anyone that does tends to fail pretty badly. Don't expect me to shed a tear for this particular genre, though. Short piece of news in regards to Peter Molyneux's latest piece of whatever the hell it is. In a statement issued to VG 24/7, he has revealed the release date for his new studio 22 Can's latest game, indeed debut and most likely only game, by the name of Curiosity. He says, we have set the release date for 0022... Oh, I see where he's gone with that, yes. PST, November 7th, 2012, as the start of the greatest experiment in curiosity the world has ever known. It was a real struggle getting it through Apple, mainly due to its uniqueness, but we are there. Thank you for remaining curious. As regards to what the game is actually about, well, he's refusing to really tell us. It's a mystery. There's some kind of box, and apparently 1 million people will be trying to solve this puzzle. So I don't even know what's going on with this, but it's Peter Molyneux being crazy again and actually making something that maybe, just maybe, he can deliver on. Peter Molyneux is known as the guy with the promises. He's the ideas man that can't seem to really implement the stuff that he keeps promising, and every game he's put out, I think since Black and White, has had this same problem over and over again. The Fable games have been plagued with it. Now finally he gets to do something a little crazy. He's focusing on a much smaller concept, so I think maybe it might actually work out. One way or another, I'm extremely curious about curiosity, and why wouldn't I be? It's an odd-looking thing, it's a strange-looking thing, and as a result, it's the kind of thing that I want at least to be some kind of part of. From the understanding that I can get from some of the interviews I've read surrounding it, it seems like it's almost an ARG, an alternate reality game, but it's an actual game in and of itself. You know the way that the Valve stuff has worked out, where people were trying to figure out various clues and puzzles? It seems like it's an entire actual app and game based around that idea. It would be nice for once to see Peter Molyneux actually able to pull something off and not get strangled by his own ambition, but there is of course the risk that that might end up happening. 22 Cans is only supposed to release one game, by the way. One, and that's it. He'll be done after that's happened, and then maybe he goes back to Lionhead, who knows, but the whole thing is indeed very curious. Now here's something interesting. You're probably not aware of this, but there is actually a company by the name of Thwack, which is a fantastic name and simultaneously a terrible name for a company. Now, these guys are actually a consulting firm, and they've been brought on by a number of video game developers to consult on the matter of science, and their mission is to provide consultation for devs looking to incorporate science into their games. They've posted articles such as exploration of nanotechnology in Metal Gear Solid and genetic modification in BioShock. Now, among its clients are the guys behind Wasteland 2, In Exile Entertainment, that have hired Thwack in order to help them shape the science fiction of that particular game. This interview is really rather fascinating, and you should read it all in full. Link is in the description below this video, but there's a really cool quote here from Brian Fargo that says, "I find it's just great to have another set of really smart eyes looking at everything we do. So for me, it goes beyond their science background on things. They've really been great at throwing out all sorts of ideas, and all of my writers have used pieces of what they've thrown out. It's really helped make the product better." Consulting is an interesting thing when it comes to video games, and I don't think many people realize that it actually happens. Yes, these companies do go to outside third-party sources to look for information on various things. If they're wanting to make a video game about realistic racing, then obviously they're going to have to bring some people in to consult on the matter, whether it be actual real drivers, car designers, all sorts of things like that. And even when making a science fiction game, you can incorporate some very interesting elements if you happen to know just a little bit of science as well. It's not even a case of realism, it's about adding just that spark of authenticity, or indeed being able to extrapolate existing science, which is relatable, into something purely wild and wonderful, which is even more entertaining. I'd really recommend going and checking out this interview because it's rather fascinating, and the link is in the description below this video. Following on from the news yesterday in regards to THQ financials, this is not looking good either for Square Enix, who have reported a $67 million loss, which is blamed partially on the slow sales, unexpected slow sales indeed, of Sleeping Dogs. It seems like the month of August has been an absolute nightmare, because Darksiders 2 is released in that month as well, and is also having sales problems. There are no official figures available for the sales of Sleeping Dogs, but it is blamed partially for this loss, because of course there was a lot of money put into marketing, and it hired some fairly high-end voice actors, and it was a big game. It was a very technically accomplished game. Now, while we don't have full sales figures, we do know that the game sold under 300,000 units in the US in its debut month, and at that point disappeared from the top 10 charts. Things were a bit rosier in the UK, where it actually debuted at #1 in the weekly charts, but even then, it seems like it hasn't actually sold enough copies. I'd like you to bear in mind, however, that this is not the only reason that Square Enix is suffering. Their arcade division in Japan, their subsidiary Taito, has had sluggish sales when it comes to their arcade titles, so things are just slowing down in general for the Japanese-based publisher. This loss is of course a forecast and doesn't necessarily bear in mind that Hitman Absolution and 2013's Tomb Raider might end up being rip-roaring successes for them, but This is not the kind of news I want to hear. It really, really is not. Square Enix has been a friend to PC gamers the last few months at least, and it seems to be continuing to do so. They're releasing really good PC versions. They are providing support. They're providing great downloadable content for their titles, and they're producing really nice hardcore games. And Sleeping Dogs is a core game. There's no question about that. It is a fantastic piece of GTA-style action with a great Hong Kong feel to it, some good martial arts, great voice acting, interesting story and character development, and of course, it's a very impressive looking game as well. I loved it. It is one of my favorite games this year, and it is really horribly depressing. First THQ and now Square Enix. What the hell is the world coming to? It's a little bit of doomsaying, I know, but it's hard to really find a positive spin on this. Sleeping Dogs was a really good title, easily far better than the preceding true crime games, and yet doesn't seem to have really broken all that well for the guys over at Square Enix. He's hoping that the holiday sales do assist in that regard, and of course, if you do see Sleeping Dogs on sale on the Steam Christmas deals, which no doubt it will be, I would highly recommend picking it up because, as I said, it is one of my favorite games this year. If you have any doubts on that particular matter, then I would suggest that you go and have a look at my rather lengthy WTF is on that particular title. And finally, the executive producer of Halo 4, Kiki Wolfkill, as well as 343 Industries head Bonnie Ross, have spoken out against sexist behavior on Xbox Live. In a rather interesting move, they stated that it's actually the responsibility of the developer to stamp out this behavior. As developers, Ross said, we have a personal responsibility to think about how our games come across. With Halo 4, we were very deliberate in thinking about who should be female and who should be male in the game, and if it came off stereotypical, we went back to question what we were doing and why. Now, while they did take responsibility for some of this behavior, they also said the behavior is offensive and completely unacceptable, and it can be dangerous to give adolescents a broadcast mechanism. There are always going to be jerks out there, and if you give them a way to express that side of their personality without being seen, you're going to see this type of behavior manifest itself. A reasonably realistic view of the problem as far as I'm concerned. And let's be honest, most of us don't really want screaming badmouth prepubescents and teenagers on Xbox Live or anything else for that matter. Whenever I play multiplayer on console, which is fairly rare, I have to say, that stuff gets muted. It really, really does. That doesn't mean that it's not a problem on PC, but it is a bigger problem on console. It's just the demographic, it's the reality of this situation. You're going to run into an awful lot more kids than you will in PC games, unless of course you happen to be playing Minecraft, and that thankfully does not have voice over IP, and for that of course we can be forever thankful. Interestingly enough, this article actually sparked rumors over on Reddit that they were going to be banning players for this kind of behavior, and this was rapidly pointed out as untrue and misleading, but they will take action against repeat offenders, and quite frankly, good. I don't care if it's sexism, racism, homophobia, or anything along those lines, that stuff has no place in gaming. It's offensive and it's annoying. You know, you can even say, well, oh, I'm not offended by this, I'm enlightened, I'm not offended by anything. You're still gonna find the bloody thing irritating. There's a difference between trash talk and that kind of nonsense, and quite frankly, it's utterly uncreative to resort to such things. In my day, you actually had to be reasonably witty in order to properly trash talk in video games. These days, it's just screaming the same obscenity over and over again, and hoping that your opponent gives in simply because you're being an annoying little shit. Have I gotten more cynical as the years have gone by and started to really hate the younger generation in games? Oh, don't worry, I hated the younger generation in games when I was the younger generation in games, so I think it's kind of a nasty cycle of complete and total terrible. Alright folks, thank you very much for watching the show. What we're going to do with the viewer remarks is we're going to round some up on Friday. I've got my guys over at the Cynical Brett subreddit working feverishly to find some of the best comments in this particular discussion on the subject of modern military shooters, and I think what's going to be happening is we may just do one topic a week and have the discussion go over the course of that week, and then maybe revisit it twice and say, here's a bunch of comments on this, and then maybe give people a chance to put forward a counter-argument to some of the points that have been going on. I think that makes much more sense than trying to do one discussion every day. That's actually crazy, so that was not well thought out. Thank you very much for watching, folks. Be sure to leave any feedback in the comment section below this video. And one last thing, there will be at least one episode next week where I will not be hosting. I'll actually be handing over the reins to Zook, who will be guest hosting the show because I will be unavailable. The show must go on, and thankfully this format does allow for guest hosting in this fashion. I'll see you next time.